Okay, I think we're live. Hello, Susan.
Hello, Rob. How are you doing?
Good. Hey, my name is Rob Ratliff. I'm an immigration attorney based in Cleveland, Ohio, and this is
Susan Hiller, and I'm an immigration attorney based in the Charlotte area of North Carolina, including South Carolina.
excellent. And we'll have two other hosts from time to time. Anas Saleh, he's in Syracuse, New York, and Nor Shamus, who is also here in Cleveland. And their stuff will be posted in the description, as will Susan's and mine contact information in the description. So, how's immigration things going on down in Charlotte? Everybody getting detained and locked up?
Well, we're starting to see more detentions here in the Charlotte area because of all the pressure by the administration to do 3,000 arrests a day.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I don't. That wasn't typical at the beginning of this administration in this area, but it's becoming more of a norm here.
yeah. Are is local DHS, are they objecting to bond for all EW cases, entries without inspection?
I actually don't know that. I'd have to ask other people about that. But I do know that the local ERO office is a very reasonable office, but they've had pressure put on them to conform to what the administration wants.
Yeah, we haven't had any courthouse arrests or anything like that here in Cleveland. And actually, I had a case the other day with a young man who's an unaccompanied minor, but a recent entry. And I was a little fearful walking him over to the courthouse because it just, he's in that expedited category, and there's unaccompanied minor issues. But that notwithstanding, I talked to the DHS attorney there, and he was like, "No, we're not really doing that here," and you know, no problems. So then I brought him into the courtroom, and everything was fine.
Oh,
But
that's great.
so yeah, so it went okay from that point forward. So
I'm interested in finding out more about your very interesting case that you're working on.
yes, Mr. Solomon, he's making the local headlines down in Cincinnati, and I think due to some of the ramifications, I suspect it will eventually gain wider attention. It's interesting case procedurally. He was granted asylum by USCIS back in 2018, and it had been pending ever since. He'd applied for his green card, as you do after having been on asylum for a year, and they just never approved it. They just kept delaying and asking for information, and he, with other counsel, has been involved in some litigation during that time because the government had alleged that he showed up on a on a couple of lists. Turned out inaccurate information. There was issues with respect to fingerprints not even being his. Um, so that's worked its way through. But and this is the really interesting part. In his original asylum application was obviously granted in 2018. That's under the first Trump administration. The notice of intent to revoke his um, asylum application came in December of last year, so still under Biden administration.
Right.
And then the final decision was in um, uh, June of this year, just a few weeks ago. Um, so that's just interesting that it involves all three administrations. So hard to predict. Very shaky reasoning for DHS's or USCIS's determination. I mean, the final revocation order cites two articles, and based on these two articles, we believe your your case should be revoked. And it doesn't really go beyond that. There's not a whole lot of other reasoning. Um, they identified Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. Even though he had no affiliation with Muslim Brotherhood, he was affiliated with a group that they say provided support. And the support they say that they provided was they provided some medical services to people in the community, and they helped women get to polling places to vote.
Wow. Wow.
I mean, that's pretty sketchy. You know, if they
Well,
prevented,
help you
yeah, if
with
they
the vote.
prevented women from voting, well, okay, let's talk about that. But no, I mean, that's not. It's the exact opposite. So, very, very sketchy. So it puts us back in immigration court now. Um, he's detained. He went in for a regular ICE check-in. He thought it was going to be a regular ICE check-in, and they detained him. Uh, I didn't attend that interview with him, but when he went in for that interview, that check-in with ICE, FBI was there, which
They're
neither
not.
good nor appropriate.
They're not the same FBI. In a way, under this administration.
Yeah, and I get that the administration has authorized other agencies to assist in immigration and things like that, but those officers don't stop being FBI just because they're
I
detailed to DHS or OPLA or whatever for a given day. They're still FBI. They still have their FBI priorities and their FBI quotas and all those sorts of things that they have to look at. So we'll see. We'll see what plays out of that. But we'll have the bond hearing. Bond hearing should get scheduled very, very quickly. We filed bond application the same day they detained him, within a couple hours. We filed a writ of habeas down in Cincinnati in Southern District, seeking to prevent DHS from shuffling him around the country from detention facility to detention facility to avoid the bond hearing.
That's good.
Congressman Landsman from Cincinnati area his office has reached out to DHS, and ICRO has informed him that they would not move him pending the bond hearing. So we'll see. We'll see how reliable that is. Obviously, comes with the caveat of unless something else comes up,
Uh-huh.
and we'll see. We'll see what happens. We're going to be in immigration court. I mean, the interesting thing is it puts us in immigration court de novo. The asylum application gets reviewed by the immigration judge from the beginning, and we're also going to litigate the issue of whether or not the immigration judge has jurisdiction to review the USCIS revocation. It's
Well, there
there's
should
some
be.
interesting law now. Yeah.
Would you at least probably put in the fact that there should be a presumption of a well-founded fear of future persecution because he's already been granted?
This is a double-edged sword because we get de novo review at the immigration judge. But I think it is arguable that we have one asylum officer that has said that it should be granted, and then we have 7 years later a separate asylum officer saying that it should not, and much like a circuit split argument, I think we're going to be making to the court that you've got to look at this. De novo, whatever the English word is for that, right? And take into consideration everything, but you cannot. The immigration judge should not overly rely on one or the other. I mean, I don't think you can give credence by arguing that the first opinion should have higher credence. I think it would allow DHS and OPLA to argue that no, the second opinion, and we kind of want to steer away from both, and really focus on the revocation just is unsubstantiated. I mean, you're citing two articles. You're citing two articles to show that that somehow the the activities he engaged in Egypt on behalf of a charitable organization, that charitable organization somehow also provided services to Muslim Brotherhood, and that Muslim Brotherhood, despite not being designated by the U.S. government as a terrorist organization, is in fact a terrorist organization, and that makes no sense. And even more complicating to all this is they ignored a prior ruling by the Egyptian courts that the entity that Mr. Solomon was involved with was not, in fact, linked to terrorism or linked to the Muslim Brotherhood. That the entity still, the Egyptian government has labeled Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. And that's really more of a political issue because it's an opposing party. But they've specifically said that the entity that Mr. Solomon was involved with was not a terrorist organization.
Wow.
So, we've got an asylum officer revoking asylum in this case based on two articles that they want to interpret however they want to interpret, and ignoring the actual Egyptian government and the Egyptian courts determination that this is not the case. So, I think ultimately we've got a very strong case, and the original asylum case was obviously very strong, and that's why it was granted. It's just a shame that, Mr. Solomon's got to experience the detention center for a while until we can get the bond here.
Absolutely. You think there's confirmation bias in the latter part, the second part of the decision, where they weighed it and then they just decided to go with it?
Yeah, and we got to look at whether or not there's some retaliation as well. I mean, 7 years, all this other litigation that he's been engaged in, did his wife and child are still stuck in Egypt trying to get out because they haven't approved the green card, and they haven't approved the following to join. We think that obviously has a significant impact in this case and really needs to be looked into.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. That's a shame because I remember when Muslim Brotherhood was designated a terrorist organization by the U.S. government, because as you know, I used to work for Legacy Immigration and Naturalization Service as an attorney since 1997, and also then, of course, we converted to Department of Homeland Security, and I was an assistant chief counsel under ICE.
Yeah.
And then I also remember when it became non-designated, and it may have been under the Obama administration, and then Trump came into presidency, and he didn't change that either. So they found that it was not a terrorist organization, in the last 10 years. So for them to now claim it's a terrorist organization that's not designated by the State Department or the administration is unusual.
Yeah, and it's one, it's one asylum officer, and to use the pejorative term, bureaucrat, I suppose. It's one person, and what is their training on behalf of the U.S. government that they're capable or competent to make, with this broad brush now, make this determination. And I think it really, these kinds of things can really have impact overall on the entire foreign policy and security issues when we've got one person that's going to pull two articles and from that make a determination that someone is linked to terrorism.
Well, on that note, we were actually trained as DHS attorneys that we are never to label anything a terrorist organization without the Department of State. It actually has to be the director of the head of the State Department actually would have to make that determination. And we were not allowed to do any of the charges, the national security charges, without the head of the State Department actually had to approve it. So
Yeah.
we had no authority to make that. Not even the chief counsel, not even the principal legal advisor of OPLA. It had to go to the highest echelon of the State Department, the
Yeah, and
actual head.
as it should. I mean, that's a far-reaching conclusion. I mean, that's a far-reaching conclusion. Even more than Mr. Solomon and his life and future in the country, to everyone involved with that charitable organization. We've got one asylum officer in Chicago that is essentially saying the Egyptian courts and the Egyptian government are wrong, and I think that's a problem that we that I don't think our government really wants. I mean, I don't think we need people in those kinds of positions making those kind of claims.
Well, you can't. It's such a political ramification, because that's why it has to be the head of the State Department, because that's why terrorist groups are designated by, the State Department at the highest echelon, because there's political ramifications for the United States, no matter what administration you're under. And it's not been designated, it's been taken off of the terrorist list by the State Department. And you can't have one. It is a bureaucrat, it's a civil servant. Hopefully, if they're doing their job correctly. It shouldn't be political. They shouldn't be this. They should be doing what's right, and that's not designated, so they cannot. And on the other hand, they can't be listening to the Egyptian government designate Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist group, because we can't be listening to other countries. We have to listen to our own country, how it's designated, and it's not designated by our own country. I mean, I do believe that if the Egyptian government is not designating the part that he actually helped, though, that is extremely supportive of the fact that it's not. Because
Yeah, and at a certain level, I guess you have to wonder, with all the recent budget cuts with some of the nonprofits and the NGOs and stuff, regardless of what side of the political spectrum you're on with respect to those, that obviously in the transition that creates certain levels of chaos, and whether the long-term impact of it is going to be very, very good or very, very bad, that's yet to be decided. But we're in the middle of it, while all those transitions are taking place, and in that situation, now we've got this one person in Chicago, who's in the Chicago Asylum Office, who's made this determination and broadcast this conclusion. And, is that the position of the State Department? Is Secretary Rubio, is that his position, that this group is linked to terrorism and the Muslim Brotherhood is a terrorist organization, and this nonprofit in Egypt that helps sick people and helps people get to the voting places, it's a terrorist organization? I don't think so. I mean, I really don't think that that's the case. And so we've got to fight against that. But the sad thing is, in the meantime, this individual's life has been completely disrupted. The outpouring of support from the local community has just been tremendous. I mean, if you've read the articles, he's a chaplain at a
Children's Hospital, right?
Children's Hospital, and some of the letters of support I've seen from families and members of the community have just been outstanding, just incredible. So
yeah, he sounds like a person devoted to God and to helping others and to praying for people who are in dire need in these health situations and for children.
yeah. So it's a very very odd case. I mean, it's not it's just it's not like the government has tons of documents and photos and things that say, oh, did this and did this. It's not. It's very very tenuous, and it's based on these two articles that they read the way they want to read, and it's three steps. It's arguing that he he helped an organization in that provided charitable relief. That organization, in turn, helped another organization, and that organization, even though the U.S. government says it's not a terrorist organization, it doesn't label it as one, we think it is. So we're gonna revoke based on that. So
Uh, yeah, it's very interesting. So I guess you wouldn't, if you're going to argue not to, that this decision that you're going to start again, so you're going to review it de novo of new, and the judges completely renew it new. You wouldn't call the old asylum officer to testify because you don't want the new one to testify, unless you want the new one to testify so that you can basically really hammer home the fact that he or she made her own decision, despite the fact that it is not labeled a terrorist organization by the U.S. government and Secretary of State. And that how did she have the authority to do that? Because there are specific policy memorandums out there and guidance that you will find, and I believe in the regulations itself, it says it has to be designated by Secretary of State, and that's literal. So how she was able to designate something a terrorist organization when it's not designated a terrorist organization.
yeah, and that's an interesting point because, as you know, in immigration court, our access to discovery is pretty limited. So we've really got to try to hold the government to their burden of proof and in refuting any of the evidence that we do present, and try to reach out to some expert witnesses and really just document that this group is not what this one person has said it is, and that Mr. Solomon's involvement with it is even at a lower level. He's involved locally with local help and support. So I think those things are all things that are going to come into that hearing.
I definitely would consider too, based on the internal policy, to have an expert, maybe a former government official who basically can testify that, no one person underneath the Secretary of State, and that includes, of course, all the way down to an asylum officer, can designate a group of terrorist organization, and it's not permissible. It's outside of the scope of what they're allowed to do.
Right. After
The government will not be able to refute that unless they do it in an illegal manner. Not, with lack of a better terms, but in a way that is not correct based on the law and the policy.
Yeah, and that's going to be a key part of all this is, what authority did this person have, especially after 7 years after this asylum was. So what changed? What directive made somebody pull this file and issue that notice of intent to revoke? I mean, where did that come from? And unfortunately, at this time, we don't know, and we may never know, just the way discovery is in immigration court now. Eventually, you end up, in a circuit court or something, probably, if we don't prevail along the way, or depending on how hard, DHS OPLA wants to pursue it. That's another consideration. I mean, again, this is coming from asylum officer into immigration court, so the DHS attorneys in immigration court, it's going to be a first issue for them as well. They may take one look at this and say, well, this. They could agree that the case should be granted asylum. It doesn't happen often, but they could.
They could agree, but they may get pressure that they've never gotten before.
Sure, sure, and that's where, some of the notoriety of the case comes into play as well. So,
Right.
going to be interesting.
It will be interesting.
So,
By the way, you probably know a lot of the immigration judges from the last class that was hired by underneath the Biden administration.
yeah,
Almost all have been fired, not for cause. But yet, my understanding is they're going to be hiring in September a whole slew of immigration judges. So it's not that they don't need them. And I just had a friend of mine who used to be a North Carolina practitioner was fired on last week.
wow.
And he could tell you some stories, and we probably want to have him on because he actually will tell you the story of how they were being pressured in Boston to actually, when the government asked to dismiss the cases, to dismiss them. In some terms, they were told to rubber stamp it, and he asked if the assistant chief immigration judge really meant that, and then he said, "You know what I mean," and which was, yeah, go along with it, and
Yeah.
even if the non-citizen wanted to go forward. So, in that, he did not do that unless the non-citizen agreed, because they were doing this in order to arrest them out in the hallway. So it is a pressure that is coming
From above. Yeah, it's my short tenure as an immigration judge, I never once felt, and quite frankly, I was in Louisiana. I kind of felt like they didn't even know we were there, much less have any kind of top down instruction or anything. But I, the class 2 classes ago of immigration judges, they terminated them at the end of the training. I don't know who they're going to find willing to take these positions now with the 2 year, there's the 2 year trial phase, and by the time you get through the background check and training, and the background check process takes almost a year, and then training, a couple of months, and I think 3 months or so total. You're coming up on the end of this administration by the time you get on the bench. You're right now you're barely just going to clear that 2 years. So I don't know who they're going to get to take those positions when it's so. The future of being in that position is so tenuous.
Right, and you sacrifice so much. Like this last class sacrificed so much, and you go through all this training, and then you may be moving to a new location. You may go from North Carolina to Boston, and you might have a house in North Carolina and get an apartment in Boston, and you're just getting up to speed, and they're not doing it based on how many asylums you grant. So you could have an 80-90% denial rate based on the law, because it's hard to get asylum for some people. For your case, that's a great asylum case, but and then you're let go because they can. And so why would you want to sacrifice all that? They had a Navy, a former JAG officer with veterans preference that they let go.
Wow.
And he was only supposed to have 1 year of probation. And so they did that, not in accordance with the law.
Well, and that's it. It's one thing, if those positions are being filled by people 1, 2, 3 years out of law school that maybe still establishing themselves in the legal practice. But that's not what it is. I mean, most of these judges, most people get hired judges, I would say, are 40 to mid 50s, is prominent. So you're in the prime of your career, and you're going to take a big change. I mean, I know when I took the immigration judge position, I took a pay cut to take that position, and and most do. I mean, you're sacrificing a practice, or your role in whatever organization you're with, to take those positions, and now with it, here today, gone tomorrow. I don't know. I don't know what kind of quality of people you're going to get in those positions.
And they may have, I mean, you have to have at least 7 years experience as an attorney to even
Yeah.
put in for that. But they're looking for even more experience if they can. But
Yeah.
I mean, even if they think they're going to get people who are loyalists and sign some type of loyalty pledge, which is not in accordance with the Constitution, but let's say they think that's what they're going to get. I mean, I would think anyone who takes that job wants to have, once you get into it, you want your own independence, and you're going to see people, and if you've never done immigration law before, you're going to come in contact with people who have various life challenges and experiences, and persecution that they went through in their countries, and you're going to change your mind about things. Even a hardliner is going to change their mind about things and not going to want to go along with everything that an administration tells you to do when they come across true asylum cases.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of people, you run into a whole different type of person than you see oftentimes in your legal practice. Just people with coming from very deprived backgrounds in that access to running water and education and just basic things that we consider just basic human necessities, coming from an environment where that doesn't even exist, and now we're putting it into our 21st century legal system, and that's very complicated. It's very complex, and it's overwhelming, and so very, very difficult. Very, very difficult for the people and the judges and everyone. So, all right. Well, that's like 32 minutes, Susan. That just flies by.
It does, especially with you. It's very.
Well, we'll get this uploaded. It'll be our first one, and we'll go from there. We'll start putting them out there all the time, and hopefully we can educate people on the asylum process. And yeah,
Your case is excellent. Now you have I mean, you're going against some forces that are.
Yeah.
But you have a strong case because that asylum officer cannot designate a terrorist organization.
Yeah, and two steps down, technically they designated two.
But they cannot do that.
So it's crazy. So yeah, and we're very fortunate. We have a tremendous team. I think there's about 10 attorneys that'll be working with me on the case.
Oh, that's awesome.
From different charitable organizations, and that have worked with Mr. Solomon in the past, and so. It won't just be, me against the world kind of thing.
That's awesome.
We've got a great team, so. All right. Good seeing you, Susan.
You too.
All right. We'll see you.
See
Bye.
you. Bye.